What's up, guys? I have a fascinating composed problem for you, which has a crazy solution, which leads to a win for white, but Stockfish says it doesn't work. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first I want to show you what the intended solution was, and then we'll go back and see if you guys can find the move that Stockfish says refutes the solution. All right, so white to play and win. What move should white play in this position? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to g7 check. And it's a very simple check, forcing the king to go into the corner. And the reason we want to do that is we actually have lots of different ideas to checkmate the king there. Because we have a rook, we have a knight, our king is pretty close, we have a pawn, and black has to be really careful that they don't just get mated. Okay, that's the first kind of point. So now we have to choose, what do we play next? So if you would like to pause, what do you think the intended move was for the original problem? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is g6. And the point is that we are taking away another square from the king and also setting up a really nice finish, which we'll see at the end of the line. Okay, so just know that it's basically just kind of trying to keep closing in on the king, getting ready to checkmate it. And for example, if black were to waste a move here, let's just say rook to g2, we could simply play rook h7 check. The king has to move, knight to f6 check, the king has to move over, and then rook to f7 is actually just checkmate. The knight's controlling these squares and it's defended by the pawn. So that's kind of the immediate threat that black has to deal with. So black says, okay, knight to b6 check. They're going to use this knight over here in the corner, deliver the check so that we don't have time to do our checkmate. Now, if you'd like to pause, what's the best move for white in this position? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is king to e7. And it's a little bit interesting because we're allowing the knight check. And you might have said, well, shouldn't we go to e6 to not allow any knight checks? Now black's knight can't check us. And here's why this doesn't work. Black is going to play the move knight to d5. And even though we can take it, we don't want to take it. Because if we take that knight, black's just going to start checking us. And it's just going to keep checking us. And it doesn't really matter what we do. Black could even go right next to us, and we can't take the rook, or it's a stalemate. The king can't move, but it's not in check. It's a drawn game. So that's the idea for black, okay? We can't take the knight. And if we try to go back, let's just say this way, to run over here, well, black's just going to play rook to f1 check, and we'd like to be able to block, but we can't because the knight is there. We have to just keep moving, and black essentially just keeps checking us, right? So that's the idea. Now you might say, well, how does king to e7 change any of that? Isn't black still going to play knight to d5 check? And the answer is now we have the option to go king to f8. See, before our king was on e6, we couldn't go there, but now we can. And the difference is that now when black plays check, we've got rook to f7 blocking off that threat. And now we still have threats over here that black can't deal with. For example, if they take, we simply take with the king, and this pawn is going to become a queen and black loses. Okay, so very clever detail there. We had to play king to e7, not king to e6. However, instead of the check, black says, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go rook e1 check. And we say, okay, well, we're going to move over. And then they're going to go check. And we say, okay, knight to f6, and we're going to win. And the idea here is that both of these moves are checkmate immediately. Right, black can't move the king. The knight is controlling these squares. The pawn and the king are also controlling those squares. And so any of these moves would be checkmate. However, the final little part of this is that rook takes f6 check. We take it. Knight to d5 check. And black wants us to move away. Wants us to move away from the rook so that the king can just take it. Now it's a draw, right? But of course, we're not going to do that. We're going to go up to keep our rook defended. But black has a crazy move, knight to f6. And if you'd like to pause, what is the idea behind black playing the move knight to f6? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is that we can't take it. Or again, we have another stalemate. Black's not in check, they can't move, the game is a draw. Same idea, right? So what do we do? How do we win the game for white? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is why this puzzle was so special. The move is rook to h7 check. Black is forced to capture it, and we finish the game with g7 checkmate. It's a beautiful rook sacrifice, which leads to the pawn checkmate. It's kind of like a smothered mate where black, his own piece is blocking the king. Really nice, okay? However, like I mentioned, there was a problem somewhere along the way, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to see if you can find it, okay? So going all the way back, we had rook to g7, we had g6, we had knight here, and then I showed you what happens if knight to d5 check. I showed you what happens if rook to e1 check. There is a move in this position that black can play which draws the game. And this was the move that was overlooked by the composer of this study. So if you would like to pause, what can black play to draw the game? It's a crazy move, but see if you can find it. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, make sure you let me know in the comments if you found this move, because I want to see how many people found it. The move is knight to d7. Knight to d7. And the first point is similar to what we've already seen. If the king takes it, well, then black says, okay, I'm just going to go for the king, and I'm just going to keep putting you in check over and over again. Check, check. And if you try to block with the knight, I'm going to simply take it, and you can't take it, or it's, again, we get a stalemate. The only other thing that white might want to try would be right here to go to f8, trying to block with the rook. But again, black has another trick, sacrificing the rook this way, and this is also a draw. Okay, so there's no way around that. The other point about knight to d7 is that if we don't take the knight and we try to just come over here, notice we can't go to the f8 square like we could before because the knight, which means we can't block with our rook, which means once rook f1 happens, we have no way to get out of this check. Knight to f6 is what we want to play, but we can't because there's a rook and a knight there, right? And I think we actually lose if we do that. So it's just a draw. Okay, so this was the crazy move that Stockfish finds, which draws the game, knight to d7. Now, it gets even more interesting because if you back up all the way to the beginning, rook to g7 check, king here, g6 was the intended move of the composer. However, Stockfish says if you don't play g6 and you play something else, you can actually still win the game. So if you'd like to pause, what's the winning move, which is verified by Stockfish? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is simply king to e7. And essentially what Stockfish is saying is, hey, I don't need to move that g-pawn up to create some checkmate threats. I'm just going to get my king involved right away. So for example, if the rook comes over with check, you just move over. And if the rook comes over with check, you just block. And you still have the same threat. Black didn't have time to get the knight involved, and you win. They can take you. You simply take back. I guess either way is fine. Then they still have the knight, so it's not a stalemate. That's one point. The other point is that after king to e7, if black does try to get the knight involved with, let's say, knight to b6, there's a move here, which I will let you pause, see if you can find, but there's a move here that did not exist before. See if you can find the move. Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to g6. And I say it didn't exist before because once you push the pawn up, you can't go there with your rook. But now we can. So we can make use of this move, which is the only winning move. So here black has to do something. Let's say they throw in the check. Now we can go to f7. And even though there's rook to f1 check, we can simply block. And because we haven't pushed that pawn up, we've got our rook there, we have our pawn there, we're able to get shelter for our king, and this is ultimately a winning endgame. So crazy position that, you know, had that beautiful finish in the main line, right? Well, I'll show you that one more time, where you get this position and you finish off with the pawn checkmate. It actually doesn't work because black had a way to get a draw. But even before that, there was a way for white to win. You just had to go about it in a different approach. So hope you followed that. I know it was a little bit all over the place, but it was a fun puzzle. I still wanted to show you this one, even though Stockfish did find a refutation to that line. I'll see you guys next time. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.